Welcome to the deep dive. Every day there's just this flood of global news. It's overwhelming. How do we possibly make sense of it all?
That's exactly what we try to do here, cut through that noise.
Right. We dig into a whole stack of sources, recent ones, mostly from the last day or two, June 28th, 29th, 2025.
Right.
We pull out the really vital bits, the insights.
And it's not just about summarizing. We want to connect the dots, give you that context, help you get a genuinely informed perspective without getting buried in the details.
Yeah, helping you navigate it all. And it's been a busy stretch, hasn't it? We've got politics, global conflicts, tech, even some interesting cultural stuff.
From the halls of power to, well, the boxing ring and even arguments about spelling.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Where should we start? Maybe the geopolitical chessboard? Things feel pretty tense there.
Agreed. Let's dive into Section 1, geopolitical chessboard, shifting sands and escalating tensions.
Okay, kicking off in the Middle East. It feels like a constant cycle of strikes, sanctions, nuclear worries. What's the latest picture?
Well, it remains incredibly volatile. We saw reports, Al Jazeera on the 28th mentioned Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon killed 3 people.
Another tragic incident.
Exactly. And it fits into this wider pattern of ongoing high-intensity operations. Then you look at Gaza, the BBC reported on the 29th, citing the Hamas-run health ministry, that at least 81 people were killed in Israeli strikes there.
81. That's a devastating number in just one report.
It really is. And what's striking as you look at these reports from different parts of the conflict zone is this picture of relentless military action. It just keeps going, despite all the international calls for things to cool down, for a ceasefire.
It highlights that terrible cycle of violence, the humanitarian cost. It just keeps reinforcing itself.
Absolutely. And adding to that pressure, the New York Times reported on the 29th that Israel's military seems to be gearing up to expand operations, maybe push deeper into Gaza City.
Really? Even with all the ceasefire talk?
Apparently so. It just underscores how incredibly complex and difficult it is to find any path towards peace, or even just a pause in the fighting when things are this entrenched.
Okay, so that's the immediate conflict zone. What about the broader regional tensions, particularly around Iran's nuclear program? That always feels like it's simmering.
It definitely is. And there was a pretty stark warning recently. The UN nuclear chief, Rafael Grossi from the IAEA.
Right, the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Yeah, him. He warned, according to the BBC on the 29th, that Iran might only be months away from being able to enrich uranium for a bomb.
Months. That's alarming, especially considering recent events.
Exactly. This warning comes right after a series of Israeli strikes, which Al Jazeera noted started back on June 13th, targeting Iranian nuclear facilities and military sites.
So direct military action was taken. And didn't Iran report casualties from one of those strikes at a prison?
Yes, that was another concerning report. DW and AP News on the 29th carried Iran's judiciary claim that 71 people died in an Israeli attack on Evin Prison in Tehran back on June 23rd.
But here's the thing that really stands out to me, and it's kind of fascinating, technically speaking.
What's that?
Despite those strikes, Grossi, the IAEA chief, also stated, this was reported by RT on the 29th, that Iran's actual know-how, their technical and industrial expertise for enrichment, it's still intact.
That's a crucial point. It means they could potentially ramp up enrichment quite quickly if they chose to.
So it raises a massive question, doesn't it? If military strikes can't actually erase the fundamental scientific capability, what does that mean for trying to prevent proliferation?
That is the million-dollar question, maybe trillion-dollar question. Does it mean future efforts have to focus less on eliminating capability and more on, say, incredibly strict verification and containment?
Maybe. It seems like you can't bomb knowledge away.
Precisely. It challenges those traditional non-proliferation strategies. Maybe diplomacy needs a different angle, focused on intense oversight rather than just hoping the capability disappears. How do you think that plays into the regional dynamics, especially Israel's stance?
Well, it makes the diplomatic path even more vital, but also way harder. And the tensions are palpable. RT also reported on the 29th that the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, publicly slammed threats made against Grossi in Iranian media.
Threats against the IAEA chief.
Yeah, they apparently accused him of espionage. Rubio denounced it strongly. It just shows how fraught the relationship is between Iran and the international nuclear watchdog right now.
Yeah.
Makes any kind of negotiation incredibly difficult.
Wow. Okay, let's shift focus a bit geographically to Eastern Europe. The Russia-Ukraine war continues, obviously. What are the latest developments on that front?
It's still a brutal, grinding conflict with significant losses. Al Jazeera reported on the 28th that Ukraine claimed its drones took out some Russian helicopters and air defense systems in Crimea, so they're still hitting back at key assets.
Maintaining pressure.
But there was a major blow for Ukraine, too. Multiple outlets, DW, Kyiv Post, ABC News, Politico Europe, they all reported on the 29th about a massive Russian strike.
What happened?
Ukraine lost an F-16 fighter jet, and tragically, the pilot as well. This strike was described as potentially Russia's largest aerial assault since the early days of the war in 2022.
Losing an F-16 and a pilot, that's a significant loss, both materially and in terms of personnel.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder of the incredibly high cost of this war, the sophisticated weaponry involved, and just the human sacrifice required to defend airspace in modern warfare.
And what's the view from the Russian side on this continued conflict?
Well, Orte reported on the 29th that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is sticking to the narrative that Western powers, especially NATO and the EU, are trying to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia.
Using Ukraine as a proxy, essentially.
That's the phrase he used, a battering ram. He insists Western strategies haven't worked and won't work, and he also dismissed claims that Russia intends to attack the West as nonsense. He's framing it very much as an existential fight for Russia.
Okay, so that's the Russian perspective presented in that source. And the Western or European Union stance?
The context, even for that RT report, suggests most EU countries are still backing more sanctions on Russia and aid for Ukraine. But there are internal divisions.
Like Hungary.
Exactly. Hungary continues to block certain things, like progress on Ukraine's EU membership talks. It just shows that maintaining a completely united front within the EU on this is still a challenge. It's a real tangle of different national interests and viewpoints.
Definitely a complex picture. And it's not just the direct war zone, is it? We're seeing significant unrest elsewhere in the region, too. Serbia, for example.
Yeah, things have really flared up there. We saw reports from DW, RT, Reuters, the BBC, Al Jazeera, all covering June 28th and 29th. There were violent clashes in Belgrade.
Between who?
Police and anti-government protesters. These aren't just vague protests either. They have specific demands. They want snap elections and an end to the current government's 12-year rule. They're accusing them of corruption and becoming increasingly autocratic.
12 years is a long time. How serious did the clashes get?
Pretty serious. RT reported the Serbian parliament speaker, Ana Brnabic, actually accused the protesters of trying to incite civil war. That's heavy rhetoric.
Wow. And the president?
President Vučić blamed foreign powers for stirring things up, according to RT. That's a familiar playbook.
Yeah.
On the ground, DW and RT said it started peacefully, but then some provocateurs apparently started throwing things. Police responded with tear gas, batons. People were injured on both sides.
So connecting this to the bigger regional picture, what does it signify?
Well, it seems to reflect this deep, widespread discontent, a real call for political change and accountability. It highlights the political instability that can bubble beneath the surface in the Balkans. It's a reminder that simmering frustrations can easily boil over.
A volatile region historically, for sure. Okay, one more geopolitical flashpoint before we move on. South Asia, India, and Pakistan. What's happening there?
Tensions have spiked again. RT reported on the 29th that this followed a deadly terrorist attack in North Waziristan, Pakistan. 13 Pakistani soldiers were killed.
13 soldiers. That's a major incident.
It is. And the Pakistani military's reaction was immediate and strong. They publicly accused India of orchestrating the attack, calling it a, quote, cowardly act by a terrorist state.
Strong words. How did India respond?
Swiftly and just as strongly. According to RT, India's Ministry of External Affairs flatly denied it, calling the accusation false and malicious.
So back to the familiar pattern of mutual accusations.
Exactly. This incident just intensifies that long, dangerous history of blaming each other for militant activities and cross-border issues. The real worry here, of course, is that these are two nuclear-armed neighbors. It underlines just how fragile the security situation is and how deep the mistrust runs. Any spark could potentially ignite something much bigger.
A deeply concerning situation that always requires careful watching. Okay, let's pivot now. Section 2. Domestic political arenas, bills, battles, and ballots.
Right, let's bring it closer to home, starting with the U.S. There's been a huge amount of focus on former President Trump's major legislative push, the big, beautiful bill, as he calls it.
Yes, that's been dominating the headlines.
What's the latest on its journey through Congress?
Well, initially, there was some drama. The BBC reported on the 28th that Senate Republicans actually had some holdouts in their own party, creating uncertainty.
Internal resistance.
For a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But they seemed to rally.
Yeah.
Reuters reported that same day that they were pushing ahead with this massive tax cut and spending bill.
And did they overcome the resistance?
They did. The Washington Post confirmed on the 29th that they managed to get their ducks in a row. And then Al Jazeera and AP News reported later on the 29th that they actually voted to advance the bill. Sounds like it was a dramatic late-night session.
So it's moving forward in the Senate, but opposition hasn't just disappeared, right?
Oh, definitely not. Politico reported on the 28th that even within the Republican Party, House GOP moderates were really digging in against parts of it, especially the proposed cuts to Medicaid. It shows those ideological splits even within the party.
Interesting. And what about impacts outside of Washington, D.C.?
Well, Politico also had a story on the 28th quoting Louisiana hospitals.
Yeah.
They issued a pretty stark warning, saying the mega bill would be devastation for their operations and services. That brings potential real-world consequences into sharp focus.
Mm-hmm. And didn't the Democrats have some kind of tactic planned?
Yeah. Again, Politico reported they were planning to slow things down by forcing an out-loud reading of the entire bill. It's 940 pages long.
Wow. That would take a while.
Right. It just shows the intense partisan fighting, the procedural maneuvers, and how complex these huge pieces of legislation really are. Every detail is a potential battle.
It really encapsulates the current U.S. political climate. And wasn't there a high-profile critic weighing in again?
Oh, yes, Elon Musk. He doubled down on his criticism. Yahoo News and RT reported on the 29th he called the bill utterly insane, warned about debt slavery, job losses, especially in future-focused industries.
He's not holding back.
Not at all. And this is where it gets a bit, well, personal and dramatic.
Yeah.
RT detailed how this feud between Musk and Trump has really soured their relationship.
What happened?
Trump suggested Musk was just angry because he might lose EV subsidies. Musk then fired back, publicly alluding to Trump's alleged ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
Whoa.
Yeah. He then quickly apologized for that specific comment. But it just shows how volatile things are, how quickly these high-profile relationships can shift when policy and big money get involved. It's quite the spectacle.
Definitely adds another layer to the whole thing. Beyond the bill, Trump's influence is still being felt elsewhere, right? Particularly the judiciary.
Absolutely. CNN had a piece on the 29th characterizing the recent Supreme Court term as having significant wins for Trump, mentioning boomerang appeals. It suggests his impact on the courts is ongoing and shaping the legal future.
And any concrete examples of policies linked to him?
Yes. Regarding immigration, AP News and Yahoo News reported on the 29th about Iranians who've lived in the U.S. for decades being arrested as part of this intensified deportation drive associated with Trump's stance.
Even people here for decades.
Yeah. The Homeland Security Department apparently noted about 600 Iranians had overstayed visas, originally entering as visitors or students, but some had been here a very long time. It highlights the real human impact of these policies and legal strategies.
A tough situation for those individuals. Okay, let's hop across the pond to the UK. What's happening in British politics?
Well, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer made a strong statement, reported by the BBC on the 28th, calling fixing the welfare system a moral imperative. So a clear focus there.
Mm-hmm. Social policy focus.
And the NHS, the National Health Service, is constantly in the headlines. The BBC on the 29th noted front-page discussions about reforms, including ideas like cut weight to cut weights.
Interesting phrasing. Trying to link preventative health to easing pressure on the system.
Seems like it. Addressing the root causes, perhaps. Also, on the political front, there was an ethics issue. An MP referred himself to the parliamentary commissioner over cash for questions allegations.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Basically, it's an accusation that the MP might have taken money or favors to ask specific questions in Parliament to benefit someone's private interest.
Right. So the MP referring himself suggests transparency.
Yeah, facing it head on, which is generally seen as the right move. But the fact the allegation exists at all raises those concerns about integrity and influence in politics. It keeps the spotlight on ethical standards.
Always important for public trust. Okay, broadening out again to other international political developments, what about Germany?
Some shifts there. DW reported on the 29th that the Social Democrats, the SPD, elected new leaders at their conference. That could signal some changes.
And anything on the defense side? We hear a lot about Europe reassessing security.
Yes, definitely. DW also reported the CSU chief, Markus Söder, is pushing for Germany to buy 2,000 interceptor missiles.
2,000 for what?
For a German version of Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. It's a direct response to worries about air defense capabilities, likely fueled by the situation in Ukraine and broader tensions.
That's a significant proposal. It really speaks to Germany's evolving defense thinking, moving away from its post-war reluctance towards more robust capabilities.
Absolutely. It shows how current global events are forcing a rethink across Europe. Elsewhere, a sad development from Hong Kong.
What's happened?
Al Jazeera reported on the 29th that the League of Social Democrats, a well-known pro-democracy party there for almost 2 decades, they announced they're disbanding.
Disbanding? Why?
They cited the increasing pressure on pro-democracy groups under the current political climate and the national security law. It's seen as a major blow to the pro-democracy movement there, highlighting just how challenging that environment has become for dissenting voices.
A real sign of the times in Hong Kong, unfortunately.
And one last international political note. Former U.S. President Trump weighed in on Israeli politics again.
How so?
Al Jazeera reported on the 29th he publicly defended Benjamin Netanyahu, who's facing that corruption trial, and he also criticized the Israeli prosecutors involved.
Interesting. A former U.S. president commenting directly on an ongoing trial in another country.
Yeah, it's quite the intervention. It highlights those complex international relationships and how external figures can try to influence domestic legal and political situations, blurring lines.
Definitely raises questions about diplomatic norms. Okay, let's shift gears into Section 3, technology, society, and environmental challenges.
Right. Starting with tech and creativity, there's a bit of a battle brewing over AI and books.
Oh, tell me more.
TechCrunch reported on the 28th that a group of authors are really pushing publishers hard. They want them to restrict the use of AI in actually creating books.
So not using AI as a tool, but AI as the author.
Exactly. They're advocating for a pledge against machine-generated literature. The core concern seems to be about preserving human creativity, the authenticity of storytelling.
It's a fascinating debate, isn't it? Where do you draw the line? AI can be a powerful assistant for research or editing, but when does it cross over into actual authorship? And what does that mean for the value we place on human creation, not to mention the livelihoods of writers? It forces us to think about what originality even means now.
A really fundamental question for creative industries. And tech is also changing things in finance, specifically crypto.
How so? Is it becoming more mainstream?
It seems like it might be. Yahoo Finance reported on the 29th that using crypto to get a mortgage could become easier soon.
A mortgage with crypto?
Yeah, the idea is that technology is streamlining the process, potentially making crypto a more widely accepted way to pay for big things like real estate. It suggests crypto is moving beyond just being an investment asset.
That would be a significant shift, integrating it into major traditional transactions like home buying. Interesting. Let's turn to environment and health. What are the big challenges popping up?
Well, on the weather front, there's some concerning news for hurricane forecasting. ABC News reported on the 28th that meteorologists are losing a really important tool.
Oh no, what tool?
It's called the Special Sensor Microwave Imager Sounder, or SSMIS. Apparently, it's vital for seeing through clouds and gathering data for predictions.
So losing it makes forecasting harder, especially during hurricane season.
Exactly. It's a significant setback for predicting storm intensity and track accurately. And speaking of storms,
Are there active ones now?
forecasts are showing potential development. AOL.com and Yahoo News reported on tropical storms, Barry and Flossie possibly forming in the Gulf and Pacific, with a warning out in Mexico. And Yahoo News also mentioned a severe thunderstorm warning for Naples, Florida.
So the season is active and forecasting tools are degraded. Not a great combination.
No, it really highlights our vulnerability and how much we rely on that tech. On a related climate note, the BBC had an interesting piece explaining the urban heat island effect.
Ah, yes, why cities get hotter than the countryside.
Right. Less vegetation, less water, lots of dark surfaces like buildings and asphalt soaking up heat. Understanding that is pretty crucial for cities trying to cope with heat waves, plan green spaces, things like that.
Definitely important for urban planning and public health. What about specific health initiatives?
Some positive ones. The BBC reported on the 29th about schools in the UK trialing sun safety lessons for kids as young as 5.
Teaching them about UV levels and sunscreen early, that sounds smart.
Yeah, really proactive against skin cancer long term. And France has brought in a big smoking ban, according to DW on the 29th.
Where are they banning it?
On beaches, in parks, other public spaces, the main aim is to protect people, especially kids, from passive smoking.
Makes sense. Any news on global health funding? Always a concern.
There is. Elton John, who's been a longtime advocate, highlighted the great progress made on HIV/AIDS, but warned about potential setbacks if budgets get cut. That was on Yahoo News.
A crucial warning.
But on a more positive note, the UN reported that the Democratic Republic of Congo has launched a new initiative aiming to eliminate AIDS in children by 2030. They called it a beacon of hope, even with funding challenges globally.
That's fantastic news, a real commitment.
And back in the UK, the government is apparently pushing food retailers to make healthy options more appealing, trying to tackle obesity. That's according to the BBC.
So, lots of different angles on public health, from prevention to policy.
Definitely. Unfortunately, we also have to mention a couple of tragic accidents reported recently.
Oh, dear.
The BBC reported a 7-year-old child died, and others were injured when a tree fell in a park. Just awful.
How terrible.
And also in London, the BBC said 2 people were injured, one critically, when a car overturned right in Piccadilly Circus. A reminder that accidents can happen anywhere.
Truly tragic incidents. Shifting slightly to crime and social issues, what's on the radar?
Well, a concerning trend highlighted by DW regarding Pakistan. Social media platforms, initially seen as empowering, are increasingly becoming sites for cyberbullying, harassment, hate speech, especially targeting women.
The darker side of connectivity.
Exactly. It underscores that global need for better online safety measures and digital literacy to protect people.
Absolutely critical. What else?
Okay, now for that story, that sounds like it's straight out of a spy novel.
Yes, the MI5, MI6 story.
It's the one. RT reported on this massive 20-year investigation by British intelligence, codenamed Operation Wedlock.
20 years. What were they looking for?
A suspected Russian double agent, a mole, supposedly hidden deep within MI6. The whole thing was partly triggered by a tip from the CIA back in the mid-90s.
Okay, so a classic mole hunt. Did they find anyone?
Here's the kicker. After 2 decades, deploying, 35 officers, tons of surveillance, they found no conclusive evidence of espionage.
Nothing.
Nothing concrete. The person they suspected reportedly just left the agency eventually, no charges filed.
Wow. A 20-year investigation comes up empty. That's quite something. What does that even tell us?
Right. It makes you wonder about the challenges, the paranoia, maybe the sheer difficulty of proving things in that world.
Yeah.
Or maybe how much resources get sunk into things that don't pan out. It's a real intelligence enigma, isn't it?
It truly is. Fascinating. Shows the complexities and uncertainties they operate under. You have to wonder about the cost versus the potential benefit of such a long-running probe with no result.
Definitely. And just quickly, a couple of other crime items. Yahoo News had a slightly amusing one about a defendant in Kentucky who apparently talked his way into getting extra time in court. Not sure what that entailed.
Intriguing.
And more seriously, FOX40.com reported a police standoff in Northern California after a man allegedly shot at his neighbor. And the BBC reported an arrest in County Down over the tragic murder of a pregnant mother.
A mix of the bizarre and the tragic there. Okay, let's move into our final section. Section 4, arts, culture, and the world of sports.
All right, a bit of a lighter touch maybe, though not without controversy. Glastonbury Festival was on.
Glastonbury, always huge. Lots of big acts.
Yeah, the BBC mentioned people like Charlie XCX, Neil Young captivating crowds. But the big story wasn't just the music.
What happened?
Controversy over chants that were aired live on the BBC's broadcast. The government even condemned them.
Chants? What kind of chants?
Well, the BBC and RT reported police are reviewing footage. Apparently, the punk rap group Bob Villain shouted death to the IDF and pro-Palestinian slogans.
Oh, wow. That's provocative.
Extremely. It drew immediate condemnation from the Israeli embassy, the UK government. The BBC ended up removing that part of the broadcast, calling the remarks deeply offensive. Another group, Kneecap, also led an anti-Keir Starmer chant.
So it really puts the festival and the broadcaster in a tough spot, doesn't it? Free speech versus potential offense or incitement.
Exactly. It's that constant tightrope walk for major cultural events navigating political expression, artistic freedom, and broadcasting responsibility, especially when things are so polarized.
A very tricky balance. Were there other big cultural moments making waves?
Yeah, a few interesting ones. Al Jazeera reported protests in Venice, not about tourism this time, but against Jeff Bezos' massive multi-million-dollar wedding there.
Protesting a wedding? Why?
It seemed to highlight the clash between that kind of extreme opulence and the environmental fragility and over-tourism issues Venice is already facing. A symbol of inequality, perhaps.
Gotcha. What else?
A powerful scene in Budapest. The BBC reported thousands turned out for Budapest Pride. Even though Orban's government had tried to ban it, it basically turned into a huge anti-government rally.
A real act of defiance.
Absolutely. a clear message against those repressive LGBTQ laws in Hungary. On a different note, the BBC shared musicians and fans reminiscing about the iconic Sheffield music venue, the Lead Mill, highlighting its cultural importance.
The value of those legendary local venues.
And kind of surprisingly, AP News reported that tourism is slowly starting to pick up again in Afghanistan. The Taliban government is apparently expressing willingness to welcome tourists, trying to project a more open image.
Afghanistan opening to tourism, that's unexpected. Raises many questions about what that experience would actually be like.
Definitely. And speaking of culture and unexpected debates, remember that spelling controversy?
Yes, the lowercase g for God in Russian.
That's the one. RT reported on this. New spelling guidance suggested maybe not always capitalizing God outside of purely religious texts, like in everyday phrases.
And the Russian Orthodox Church wasn't happy?
Not at all. They consider it sinful, disrespectful, even a hangover from Soviet atheism trying to diminish the divine. The Language Institute argued it's just about context.
It's amazing, isn't it? The power packed into a single letter. Who knew a lowercase g could cause such a fuss?
It really makes you think about how language, religion, and cultural history are all tied up together, even in punctuation.
A fascinating linguistic battleground. Okay, let's round things off with sports. What happened in the ring or on the field?
Big news in combat sports. Jake Paul, the YouTuber turned boxer, fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.
How did that go?
Paul dominated. Yahoo News, MMA Junkie, BBC, ESPN, CBS Sports all covered it. He won decisively and immediately called for tougher fighters. Next. He's clearly serious about climbing the ranks.
Making a statement. What about MMA? UFC?
Huge news there, too. Ilia Topuria pulled off a stunning knockout against Charles Oliveira to win the UFC lightweight title.
Wow, Oliveira's a big name.
Exactly. This is Tupuria's second title in a different weight class. And he's already calling out Paddy Pimblett for his next fight. So, major shifts in both boxing and UFC.
Definitely shaking things up. Any other sports highlights?
Quick rundown. Luke Humphreys won the U.S. Darts Masters final over Nathan Aspinall, according to the BBC.
Darts still going strong globally.
Yep. And a fun moment before Wimbledon. Al Jazeera noted Coco Gauff and Arina Sabalenka did a viral TikTok dance together. Nice to see that camaraderie.
Yeah, it breaks attention a bit.
The NHL Draft just happened. Daily Face-Off had all the team grades and analysis for hockey fans. And in rugby, the BBC mentioned Pupilo too, finding form and praising other top players like Ringrose and Russell. So, lots happening across the board.
A busy couple of days in sports, too.
So that brings us pretty much to the end of our source dive for today. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We certainly have. From those really serious geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, which have such huge global consequences,
to the intricacies of domestic politics, like that massive U.S. bill and the drama surrounding it, even involving figures like Musk.
And then diving into how technology is reshaping everything from authorship with AI to finance with crypto.
Well, plus those critical environmental updates like the hurricane forecasting issues and all the public health initiatives trying to make a difference.
And we can't forget the cultural side, Glastonbury's controversies, the Budapest Pride defiance, even that fascinating Russian spelling debate, and of course, the latest from the world of sports.
It really paints a picture of how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? Big global events, policy fights, tech shifts, cultural moments, they all weave together.
Absolutely. And as we've seen again and again today, the lines are constantly blurring between human and artificial intelligence, between national politics and international influence, between free speech and responsibility.
It's getting harder to draw neat lines around anything.
Exactly. Which leads to a thought for you, our listener, to maybe chew on after we sign off. With all these rapid developments, this constant blurring, how does it affect how we understand truth? How do we decide who or what holds authority in a world just saturated with information coming from every angle?
That's a deep one. A really important question for all of us navigating this complex world.
Definitely something to think about.
Well, we hope this deep dive gave you some clarity, connected a few dots, and maybe sparked some new questions too. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Keep digging. Stay curious.
Until next time on The Deep Dive.